Hi, friends. I'm Amelia,
And I'm Danielle.
and welcome to Sybil's Lab of Cartomantics. We are here with a fun Sybil's Gab today. Danielle, why don't you tell us what we're going to be talking about?
We are going to keep things pretty simple. We wanted to share with you the shape of our fall practice as we imagine it and idealize it. So we have three basic prompts that are going to walk us through how we came to that, and really share some specifics about the decks and books or whatever it is, practices that we're really excited to dig into in the coming season. So why don't we get started? Our first question is, what is the stuff of our lives that is emerging during this season? So what's coming up that really is going to inform the choices we make around our practice?
I'll start us out. So it has been like 2 years of transitions, but I think I have finally settled in transition space. I've had big job and life transitions in the past couple of months. I really pulled back on, especially like working life. And shifting my focus and restructuring my life in a way that ultimately creates more space. Like that's kind of the end of all of this, is that there's more space and more room for me to really kind of sink into, cycles and seasons and rhythms, and in a way that feels right for me, but in a way that I'm kind of having to like rebuild from the ground up. I have spent the past many years kind of going on other people's schedules and not really being able to form not just like a daily like routine and schedule, but like a long-term schedule that is for me. And I finally have that space and I can like breathe into it a little bit more. So for me, the stuff of my life right now is getting to explore that space and see what I can do with it. That's kind of getting into goal stuff. But that's kind of where I am right now. Like, there's a lot of space now. I mean, not tons. I still have things that I have to do.
Humans you live with, a little human to take care of.
I've got a kid. I've got, we've got Sybil's Lab stuff that we're working on here. It's not a luxurious amount of space, but it's some, and like, especially agency. Like I'm moving into a season of life where I have a little bit more agency over my time. And so I'm trying to figure out how I want to use that to its fullest potential. What about you?
I'm transitioning from an academic career, and there's a way that being an academic for a person who likes lists or likes calculation is really helpful. So, like, how many talks did you give? How many publications do you have? Like, did you win any teaching awards? That's really quantifiable. Love checking off the box. You know whether you did it or not. And there's a way in which my sense of self became the better I did as an academic, deeply tied into that kind of recognition. So I feel like I'm transitioning to a different construction of self that is not tied into the way that other people are assessing my productivity, and where I am constantly anxious about the nature of that recognition, how many applications for fellowships I put in. Like, I'm really trying to figure out how to move in the world differently. I don't know if you feel this. That's both really exciting to think about, moving through the world differently and understanding myself differently, and kind of frightening. Like, it's super like, wow, there are so many possibilities, but also I knew how to do that. This is a new chapter and I don't know how to do this well. What am I thinking? Why would I leave a thing that I know and can do well for this other thing? So I'm trying to figure out how to embrace that in a way that feels a little aligned with what you're going through. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember, so right after my child was born, I was a full-time teacher before he was born. And then right after that, like, long story, but my contract wasn't renewed for teaching, and it was kind of a big blow. And I remember like it was like a death of like part of my identity. It was so bizarre. I mean, I was still teaching very part-time on the side, but it was in a different capacity, and it wasn't in the way that I had been doing it before. And yeah, like, and then when I ultimately decided to like step away from theater work too, like that was another death of a thing. The what I am stepping away from now was not like a good place for me. So I'm like, woohoo, what can I, so it's like an exciting thing for me, but I've been where you are, where it's like, I know this is the right choice, but it's all I've ever known. And a lot of like who I am was so tied into the work that I was doing.
It's really strange. I love some symmetry, and I love that it was about when I hit 40. That I was like, okay, this chapter's in. I did graduate school and an early career during, my 20s, and I did I got tenure, did the whole academic pursuit of whatever in my 30s. It was a good run. It was good. And I think in part, I have the good fortune of just not doubting. Like, I knew I needed to do something different. It would feel more anxiety provoking if I was like, what have I don't know. I'm just now trying to figure out how to do it in a way that feels good, like do life differently. So I think in part, that involves figuring out how to value other ways of knowing things. Like, ooh, fancy PhD. It's really helpful when you're a professor to have a PhD. It is a very little value for actual, like, I needed someone to build a deck. My PhD is not helpful for that. Like, there are so many real world things that this is a matter of indifference for. It's good. It's humbling. And it means that it's important to value other ways of knowing. And I am deeply connected to my origins, my humble origins, right? My mom is from an Amish community. They're not exactly known for their pursuit of higher education. My father's from the Caribbean. He has higher education, but it's something that's more difficult in the Caribbean. So it feels good to lean back into where I come from and figure out how that can inform like the renewed me. I am an aspiring crone. This is my favorite description of myself these days. Final thing that is coming up for me, and I've mentioned more than once that my dog is going through it right now. He has some health problems. So I'm trying to figure out how to manage difficult emotions in a way that feels healthy. And pain is pain, grief is grief. There's nothing, he's not going anywhere yet as far as we know, but he is having some challenges. So I think it's responsible and good, and leans into everything that you and I know tarot can do to figure out how to use this tool right now so that I'm not surprised by my grief or stress or whatever, and figuring out how to integrate it now before I'm like falling apart and calling you sobbing, and you're like, get a deck. Like, get your life together, sit down, here are questions to ask yourself. So anyway, I'm probably still going to call you though. Be prepared.
I'll be ready. No, I mean, but also like because I'm sure that you're like caring for your dog is taking up more of your life now. I mean, tarot and card work generally can be so enriching for caretaking work. It's part of my whole spiel, especially at this point in my life. And it doesn't have to be big, complicated work. It can be really simple and accessible as your life is like more and more consumed by your little lovey dog that needs your attention all the time.
My beloved mommy's little burden creature who I hug and sleep with, and he stresses me out. All right, our next question on that note, he's over here sleeping right now. On that note, what are our goals for this new chapter of the year, this new literal season, our goals as they connect to what we just described about our lives? What are your goals coming up?
Sure. So when we talk about, I'm talking about how I have this space and I want to kind of, and I'm like, I kind of like knocked everything down to as ground zero as it is possible. And I'm trying to be very intentional about like, okay, how do I rebuild this? And so one of the things for card work this fall is that I definitely know that I want to shift away from like dedicated learning and study and kind of more academic pursuit of tarot and pull it into a more like abstract and experiential space. So I know I was telling you this before, but like if my life for the past, like my life, not just tarot work, but like my life for the past however many years has been so air and earth, especially a lot of earth that I've tried to like kind of balance with some air. I am like intentionally moving into a space of more water and fire and really making room for that in my life. So shifting away from that, and like really reconnecting to and rooting into spiritual practice as its own thing, not as something that is like tagged on to other bits of my life as I'm able to, as well as creative practice, which those two things are often like two sides of the same coin for me. Creative practice and spiritual practice are part of the same thing, but just like giving myself room and space to explore within those. So that looks like card work that roots me in creativity and play, particularly in, well, we'll talk about the how, and card work that gives me a space to notice and find presence in like the world, as well as kind of like how do I explain it, like the spaces in between what we see and experience in our lives, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm moving
about liminality. I've heard you talk. Are you talking about, what do you mean by liminality in this?
I don't know, and I think that's like what I want to explore, right?
I love it.
Is this idea of like, okay, here's like the birds that I see, but like and like here every morning when I wake up, but like what's underneath all of that? Like what's kind of like coursing through the experience of
questions. These are like the wisdom questions, the big things.
Yes. And like really just letting myself sit with those and not need an answer right away, but like to ask questions, to not just exist solely in everything as it is at face value. So in spiritual practice is always going to involve like the natural world for me. We are so excited to, well, again, we'll talk about that in the how later, but like the natural world is a big part of spiritual practice for me. So like really connecting back into that, and having specificity and like intentionality with that connection. And then just generally like I'm embracing oracle cards a bit more. And this is also part of that kind of like, not needing something structured and systematic to hold on to, but really, really letting myself lean into abstract thought and idea a little bit more. And like letting myself flow with things a little bit better.
Are you suggesting that you're a little uptight?
No, maybe. No, I mean, I have so needed structure in every part of my life. Otherwise, things just kind of like fall apart. Like we're working with a house of cards here. And I don't need it as much right now. So I'm able to kind of lean into like intuition a little bit more, as well as not needing an answer right away because it's not pressing, right? There's like my pace is, I'm able to like slow down so much more. And so just like tarot and card work generally, whether it be tarot, oracle, like as a practice that lets me slow down, have presence, and like notice things that I normally wouldn't be able to.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
I like it.
I think that's it. That was so like a long, it's not even a bulleted list. It's like, here's
about a season. There should be. I like that you, I'm like waving pens around. I really like that you have an intense conceptualization of what you want to do. We're not talking, I mean, you know, we take this stuff seriously. So why not have a kind of rich sense of what it is that we're actually up to? Although, I don't know, after that study, you and I were talking, we did a deck study with the Marielle, and like, deck, that was an intense, this is a non-stop.
That's what I'm talking about, is like, I'm not, so I have some decks that I'm going to be working with. I'm not doing like a deck study here. Like, this is all about like practices and like rooting into, just like a part of myself that I haven't been able to give as much attention to.
You and I, when we started doing this, talked about how much we love being teachers and how we both think we're good at teaching. And I love a good syllabus. I love good learning objectives. So I don't know if this is true for you, but part of my struggle or my challenge right now, in a good way, I think, but the challenge is moving away from that kind of structured learning, like making a syllabus for myself in the fall. I have to say, this was really exciting to do, but I need to figure out how to convert everything that it is that we're talking about to a plan that is not a prison. You know? So figuring out how to do this loosely in the way that you're talking about, so it's not like checking off like, all right, I worked with that deck, but in any case, here are my 4 bullet points. I say not to be too structured. My 4 bullet points for my goals. So the first one, in relationship to this kind of valuing other forms of knowing and releasing the belief, I think the internalized belief that degreed or formalized ways of knowing are superior, are where I find my confidence and comfort, I think is me embracing a more like the roots of kitchen table practice, you know, like just some cartomancy, just like unfancy, plain decks that harken back to where all of this stuff comes from. And I'll mention the decks in a second, but they are not tarot decks. They're just decks that like people could use, 2 of them could use to play games that happen to now be decks that we use for something different. So that is important. That's a priority for me. Another priority is I want to tap back into my creativity. I think that I've been really figuring out how to structure my time differently, just the mechanics of moving differently in the world, that I've let go of like the exciting creative possibilities. I like writing. I like looking at visual art. I really am jealous of people who are visual artists, but I appreciate their art. But like there are other things that I like to do creatively that I have not let myself focus on. I think in part, so much of my bandwidth has been like stressed out or consumed otherwise. And I could use the support of our practices to tap back into that creativity and like helping anchor that in case I feel like I don't have something to help channel that energy or interest. And there are some like, here's the deeper stuff. Like I am realizing in part, for example, with my like deep valuing of structured, degreed, official, credentialed ways of knowing things. Some of that's rooted in stories that I tell myself from childhood. We all bring our stuff, our baggage. You and I have joked, and I've told my mom about this, that we're survivors of Virgo mothers. I don't know that I would blame her for this. and I adore her. She's like my favorite person, one of a few. But I've inherited that, like that deep investment in um, acknowledged and confirmed, like, you did it, like, and there's a right way to do it. So I need to revisit some of those stories that have worked for me, but are no longer serving me, and where they come from, because I think some of them come from not like, come on, Danielle, think differently today. They come from stuff that is like old stories of the self that we learned and internalized from like little children. So I need to dig into that, and enter that with curiosity. Like, it gets called inner child work, but it's just investigation of like how this happened.
Where did it go wrong?
Where did this, whatever, this mess of a person come from? And I kind of said this. I often made a point to mention to students when I was still teaching that I struggle with seasonal depression right around this time of year. And I would do that because lots of us feel that way. There's so much embedded shame around that, for many of us. So I'll mention it here that I like sort of struggle with like mood right around this time of year. My mood dipping with the season change. So on top of sort of trying to figure out how to support myself emotionally as I manage my dog's health stuff, is a difficult time of year. And so one of my goals is to really dig into how practice and card work and all of that can support healthy management of like shifting feelings, because there are going to be highs and lows. So how is it that that can happen safely and helpfully? P.S. I love therapy, love all that stuff. So aside from that, right, this is an adjunct to that. This is not a replacement for therapy.
As an additional thing in your toolkit.
Absolutely. This is the non-degreed. So like do that stuff, but here's the stuff you can do at home, the do it yourself stuff. So, all right, this is, how do we do all this? Great goals. We have great goals. How is it that we make this stuff happen? What tools and resources, mostly in the form of decks, is it that we're bringing to this?
Oh, so I will start out with, how do I want to start this out? Gosh, there's like so much. So there are kind of like arms of like spiritual practice for me. One is going to be a big one is going to be creative work, and a big one is going to be like connection with the natural world. And then like a third arm is going to be asking the questions, just like letting myself ask questions. Okay. And so for creative work, there are a few, actually, this would be easier to start this way. So for connection with the natural world, there are a few things that I'm really diving into. So I read this book, Rooted, over the summer. It's by Lyanda Lynn Haupt. I'm not sure. This is like, I'm not a religious person. I don't follow like a specific spirituality or anything like that. But if I had to like pick a book that summed up like how I engage with spirituality, this woman has, because it's like, so her background comes from both, she was raised Catholic, so she talks a lot about like the mystics and the saints, but then she also pulls, and I was not raised Catholic, but I like pray to Mary, so I don't know what I am. But she also has a Zen Buddhist background, which I do, from earlier in my life. And she like finds kind of like the intersection of these things and connects it all to, life at the crossroads of science, nature, and spirit is the tagline for this. I loved reading this book. When I finished it, I wanted to immediately reread it. And she has at the end of each chapter, like these different credences, if you will, as like practices to step into for this type of engaged work. And so I'm going to be working back through this book again and working through those practices. Like, so I read it for enjoyment, loved it, like annotated the ever living life out of it as I was reading it. And then I'm going to be working back through this in a much slower, kind of more engaged way, along with this book, which is called The Language of Trees. It is a collection of essays and poems and just different creative works, linguistic works regarding trees. And I'm going to be working through this as well. This is kind of cool. So this is like connects me with, so there's this, she uses trees as an alphabet. Let me see if I can find the page. She creates a tree alphabet. Looks like so. So each letter of the alphabet has a different silhouette of a tree attached to it. And then at the beginning of each essay or poem, this is every word that is in the essay that you're about to read represented as a forest. You can't see it very well because it's all like whatever. I think it's the coolest thing. This is the type of stuff that here's like you can see the trees a little bit better. It is this engagement with like, here's stuff that humans put out and here's what this can look like in a visual way that like it itches all the right parts of my brain. So those are books that I'm working with for that practice. Decks that I'm working with for this practice are the Hush Tarot.
Mm-hmm. Have you done a lot of work with the Hush Tarot before, or is this really...
This is fairly new to me. I got it this summer. So I bought this and I bought the Witch Sister Tarot for kind of similar reasons, but I found that I actually connected with this one a little bit better. And especially with this whole idea of like, not seeing the unseen, but kind of like engage, like this deck feels like it exists in those spaces in between that I'm speaking of. Like it feels like it lives in the liminal spaces, in the smaller things that we don't normally pay attention to. And that's like, so part of my connection with the, rooting back into the natural world, going outside more, making that a daily practice is also a practice of noticing, of really paying attention and bringing attention back into things. So this deck is going to be part of that work along with the Rain Shadow Tarot by Claire Mack. This one kind of is going to straddle two things. So I very recently got this deck. This was a birthday gift from my husband. This is going to straddle both this work as well as creative work, because I think for me at least, it sits very well in both of those spaces. And then as for how this is actually happening, so this is like the stuff that we're using, right? But it's going to be a lot of journal work and a lot of actually like going outside, like being, we already have several camping trips planned for the summer or for the fall. And I am kind of revisiting and refining and reshaping like what daily practice looks like and how I can include different things that are valuable to me. So one of those is going to be being outside regularly, as much as I'm able to, and engaging with that world.
Does your person like to go outside with you?
He does, yeah. But this is for me. He's not invited. Sorry.
I love to hear it.
I love him. So that's like why don't we go back and forth? So that's like one of the specific, like how I'm doing this sort of practices. What is one for you?
So I mentioned doing some kind of back to basics cartomantic work. I'm using a newer deck for this work. In part, I mean, the book for this is like, hello, world. This is Caitlin Matthews' new Magical Lantern Sibilla. I have never in my life seen such a long companion book for a cartomantic deck. And I would say Sibilla is probably the form of fortune telling that I've worked with the least, possibly. So yeah, this is interesting. I like the art, but at the end of the day, like Lenormand decks, the art is secondary to the archetype. At least for me, much more than tarot, right? A heart is a heart is a heart. I just happen to like the way the hearts are in this deck or whatever. So I like the way that the widower looks. And I just really appreciate that this isn't about, I want to read a book back to front. You and I have talked in our deck study stuff about how I just don't like doing that anyway. Like, and yikes, this is like an encyclopedia. I'm certainly not reading this back to front, but I do want to embrace as they come up. I'm not looking up every card, but embrace the specificity of a Sibilla deck rather than thinking about the way that it connects to because my mind is very air making all of those connections, but Capricorn is this, and that reminds me of the Four of Swords and whatever. And I do think that a resource like this will kind of ground me if I start to get away from myself. The one that I'm most excited about, though, is if people don't know the form of kind of Spanish playing cards, they get called Spanish playing cards, but napes are a form of Spanish playing cards. There's ace through 7 and then 3 courts. So rather than ace through 10, but the cards themselves look like TDM cards, kind of clubs and swords rather than spades. But so this is going to ask me to work with my numerology ace through 7 as I conceptualize it. And I have very specific associations with each of those numbers. And what is it that I think the 3 suits do? This particular deck is made by a creator on Etsy called Unfamiliar Spirits. I do believe that creator is in Spain. So if you like it, I don't know if you've heard of these tariffs, people. But it's a tricky moment to be doing some international ordering. So in any case, I know a few people who are a part of a Spanish language tradition. So not just Spain, but you find these playing cards a lot in Puerto Rico or whatever. I know a couple Puerto Rican women who have grandmother stories about napes cards. You talked about how you used to or your mom would carry playing cards through the house like that, just always having a deck of napes around and using them for just plain old fortune telling. I love that. I have read with these cards before, but it's been a novelty, oh, let me try this form of playing card reading. And I want to give this form of practice the respect that it's due and not just sort of appreciate it for the neatness of Spanish playing card reading. So I really like that particular deck, but I have you can get a napes deck for $4 on Amazon. It's just a plain old playing card deck, and it's such a fun form of reading. So anyway, I'm very excited about that. Another way that I want to dig into that kind of back to basics, really grounded, unembellished way of knowing with the cards is doing deep work with TDM cards. Again, my favorite deck, as I've said before, is the Tabula Mundi. That is laden with symbol, aligned with correspondences. That is very much a part of a Thoth tradition, which means that it's connected to Golden Dawn color scales and the decans and whatever. When my grandmother would say and read cards, she wasn't on that. And I don't, she didn't have a TDM at hand either, but it's the same kind of humble, unassuming form of reading that I want to get back to, just the basics. So I pulled out some of my really fun TDMs that I haven't worked with extensively beyond, isn't that a neat deck? I really want to ask myself to get creative, to discover the way that TDM can inspire creativity and do all kinds of deep work. Because when I'm asking serious questions or big questions, I go to the symbol-laden fancy decks. So in any case, Le Tarot de l'Étoile Cachée is a publication of Sabbat magazine. I do know that this is out of print, but it's by an artist, Alyssa Seitzinger, who did publish a deck with Lo Scarabeo not so long ago. So if you like her art style, you can grab, I think it's a black and gold mass market deck that is RWS based, and kind of pulls on this. But I just love the idiosyncrasy of this. It has a lot of personality. It does give me something to hold on to. It's a little naughty, you'll notice in some of the cards. It is very much of its moment. This was published during COVID, so you'll find masks in this hidden, but it's, and like down there in all of the sevens, there are speaker, or like, what are they called? Loudspeaker? Huh?
Like a blowhorn? No, not a blowhorn.
You know what I'm talking about, like a microphone, blowhorn, whatever. Somebody is going to write in the comments exactly what it is. But stronger than you know is what's tied to the Ace of Batons. So I want to kind of play with this and get into what TDM can do. There are a few other TDMs I have on hand that I think are going to let me do that too. There's the Nouveau Tarot de Marseille. This is a Spanish deck. I'm not sure if it's still in print. I trimmed my version of this, but I think that the face cards have such personality. There's so much emotion in them. I have struggled in the past with the limited color palette, so I think that's why I've kind of reached for other TDMs. But look at this death card. Like, if I'm just kind of trying to excavate what kind of special work I can actually do with a TDM beyond it's time to study Tarot de Marseille, I think this is another fun deck to do that. And then I have two more. I promise I'll be quick about it. This is the Keymaster Tarot. It's mass market now. This is published by Stockholm 17. I got this deck when it was still indie. I think the mass market looks the same, though I'm not positive. This pulls in some of that cartomancy that we love, but it's a really unique presentation of cartomancy and Tarot de Marseille, and it feels seasonally appropriate. I don't know if that's the way to put it. I don't know if I mean appropriate. It doesn't feel very summery, and it doesn't feel very springy. It feels like a fall season or winter season deck. And it too, the face cards, the characters have such personality. All of the jacks have animals in them. I'm just glad to see that this deck went into mass market publication. The last one is, I just posted about this on Instagram in a story. I struggle with decks that are hyper-referential. This is called Estrella Tarot. It's a French deck. It's available on Etsy. But in this person in particular, we have as our magician, Michael Jackson. If he didn't have all of this stuff connected to him that we now understand about him, even if that wasn't there, I would be like, Michael Jackson, come on. I'm a little distracted by that. But the fact that it's him and he bears some negative associations, plainly put, that is a struggle. We have Tupac as our valet of swords. So I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to get along with this deck. I love the color palette. I love that it's irreverent. I do love some irreverence. And it is a different approach to, who is that? Is that Bernie Sanders? Is that supposed to be a person, or are we just like, look at that esteemed old white gentleman with his glasses? I don't know. This is Back to the Future. I don't know.
That's Marty McFly, I think.
I think so. It's, you know, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure how this one's going to go, because I don't want whatever decks I use, even though I pulled out some TDM decks that I'm excited about that I haven't used beyond, like, isn't that neat? I don't want to be overly distracted by something like that. At the end of the day, it's just a deck, though. So I can choose to ignore. You and I will talk about how I feel about Michael. Anyway, I babbled long enough.
Well, yeah. You know that I think Tarot de Marseille can do all work. Including and especially like ask like wisdom questions. That's what I go to for wisdom questions. So I'm excited to see how you get along with that. Okay. So second kind of arm of spiritual work for me is creative practice. So there are kind of a couple of things that I'm doing with that. One is inspired very much by this book. This is the Sketchnote Handbook by Mike Rohde. Okay, so this has nothing to do with tarot. This frankly has very little to do with creativity. So Mike Rohde is a UX UI designer. So he works in graphic design and user experience and user interface. And he developed this system, and I'll just like point to, I'll open a page, of taking notes, like meeting notes and conference notes and like lecture notes in a visual way, which sounds super dry and like, what does this have to do with tarot and creativity for that matter? But it got my wheels turning a little bit. So a long time ago, I had a practice of kind of like what you would consider like draw your day type stuff. So I would paint and draw things that happened in my days. You know, they weren't always, they're not the best work.
But you're pretty good. I haven't seen your art before. Holy cow.
But you know, it was like a way of interacting with my life and my day. I really liked doing that. I found it. And I'm a big journaler. I write in my journal every day. But I found this type of work, this like draw your day stuff, to be really fussy. Like I'm a big painter. I love painting. Like, you know, I've been painting for a really long time. I have a creative practice, like, and we'll talk more about like what I want to do with this type of work specifically. But I loved the idea of kind of engaging with my thoughts in a visual language, and getting the paints out and doing it in that manner was just too fussy for me. And it was also too literal. It's like, you know, draw your cup of coffee, but that's not what I want to do necessarily. So the whole like premise of this book is about communicating linguistic ideas in a visual manner. So you're kind of like translating in your head either words that you're hearing, usually, down onto paper using symbolic language, symbolic visual language. And it got my wheels turning. I was like, I wonder if I could tarot journal like this. If I could use symbolic, like a visual language to journal my tarot readings. And I started experimenting with it a couple weeks ago. And it's been like, I don't know, something has cracked open, because it hasn't forced me to put into words everything. This is part of that like abstraction work too. Like I'm not being forced to put into words everything that I'm feeling. I'm not literally drawing, you know, what I see in front of me or something that actually happened. Like I am interpreting my thoughts and my experience with cards using a visual language. And it's like doodles. It's not like, we're not talking about like exciting. This isn't art. This is just allowing language to come through when it wants to come through, and then allowing like visual communication to come through when it wants to come through, and like being open to all of that as being a form of communication. And so that, like, I've been really leaning into that with my journaling with tarot as like a creative practice, not just like, all right, this is the Six of Swords, and here's me writing about my thoughts about the Six of Swords as it relates to this moment in time. It's like, it's a little bit, I don't know, it's more free flow. I'll say it that way. And then the second part of how I'm engaging like my creative work is I am pulling away from the more like literal painting work that I've done into a more abstract field. I've been abstracting my work for a while. I dipped my toe into oil painting earlier this year. I'm a watercolor artist, watercolor and mixed media. I dipped my toe into oil painting because I thought that would be like an avenue into abstraction. I found it too fussy and annoying for me. I was like, can you just dry already? Like, I'm tired. I lack the patience. Maybe one day. The paints are still there. I have all of the supplies, so it'll be there for me when I'm ready. I don't have the patience for it right now. But I am pulling my watercolor work into the abstract, and really drawing card work into that. So whether I am journaling using a visual symbolic language or using my abstract watercolor work to communicate ideas as they relate to cards that I'm pulling. So one of the books that I'm working with is, I don't have it with me because it's in the other room, but it's Soul Color by Emma Burley. And it's about like abstract watercolor and using color as kind of this like intuitive tool. And so a deck that I'm working for with that is the Kei Tarot. This is an abstract deck.
What's it called?
I think it's Kei. Some people say Kai, Kei.
Okay.
I don't know. So this is a more abstract deck. It is, these are paintings. You can actually see the texture in how she like took her pictures. They're mixed media paintings, and you can see the different media that she uses as it shows up on the page, which I find, I don't know, just kind of like fascinating. Like that, her cowl is fur, and you can see it like when you're in person. I find that really interesting. So I've been working with this deck as a way to just kind of like open the door to that abstraction, and kind of let some of the light in. This has been my main deck for that work. And what else do I want to say about that? I think that's it. You know, I've been using tarot and card work with my creative work for a while. So this is more about like really spending more time with that practice than I have been able to. And then also leaning into it in a very specific way. So kind of what boils down like both of these practices. So like abstracting my work, my painting, and then using this like sketchnoting weird bonkers thing for tarot journaling is really about allowing visual language to kind of have a place within like as a mode of communication. I guess that's
okay.
Am I making sense, or do I sound like a crazy person?
If you did, I'd probably lie to you, but no, you're making sense. I mean, I think that part of us who love tarot believe that it is a language that talks. And it sounds like you're saying, of course, language talks. It's a language that is like, especially that we are people with whom that language really resonates. We love the language of tarot. And it sounds like you're exploring the way that your answer back to tarot. I think most of us answer back when we journal in words. It sounds like what you're saying is like you are speaking back to tarot in the way that it's speaking to you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And like letting that be a conversation. Yeah. Cause I mean, especially like all of this idea of like kind of going into the liminal and not being so concerned with having the answers. Like, yeah, language feels limiting in that space.
It's really interesting to think, and it really is an exercise of creativity for you to take. Was that the Queen of Pentacles with the fur?
Mm-hmm.
That is so creepy looking. I didn't know. I don't know that deck. But to take that, right? Very particular. And those are not oversaturated, overabundant images. Like it looks like she has a few things that are going on and they're meaningful things, but it's not like packed with symbols. And it sounds like you're saying I'm taking a couple of those cards and I'm not my journaling isn't drawing the different things that I see in this card and that card. It's you constructing an entirely new image on the basis of like your conversation with that is pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And it's different. That is absolutely creative.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And it's like not forcing myself to be linguistic all the time. I don't know. That can be exhausting. And there are things that are beyond words. And I think it's like those things want space to exist alongside the words.
Yeah. That's a lot. I like it. I like it. All right. I'll share a few. So I did talk a little bit about inner child stuff. And by that, I really mean what stories I grew up believing that are not immutable. Like I have questions, or what am I trying to say? Things that I took to be true as a child that are not necessarily true, and yet I still believe them. I've had a few of those epiphanies as of late. I remember coming onto a call with you at some point and being like, it never occurred to me that this emotional belief I had might not be true. For all of my like sophisticated progressiveness, it never occurred to me that a thing that I just believed was true might not be true. I think a lot of us have unexamined beliefs, but I think that those unexamined beliefs are doing unhelpful work for me. So I pulled out some decks that really invite me back into that space, because if we take ourselves very seriously, and even in our hard work or in life, it's really easy. This is the Tarot de Carlotydes. We're going to call it that. This is the little Fournier deck. Mass market, and I trimmed off the top part of the border that had Spanish, I think. But this invites me back into that space without being heavy-handed about it. This is not a deck that's, quote, made for inner child work, but there's something so evocative about like this Three of Cups that feels playful and nostalgic. Like this Wheel of Fortune feels like it invites me into memory in some meaningful way. So yeah, this is a deck that I plan on doing that work with. That I've always thought a helpful deck for me is a deck that like is delightful, and then you get close and it is like wielding a little bit of a knife. There's no butcher knife there, but it has a sting. That deck has a sting.
It is not, yeah, that is, if I had to pick a deck for you for inner child work, because I know you've got like an allergy to like certain more sweet, more saccharine decks, like that's the one for you.
Yes. So that is my favorite deck for that kind of work. I've used it before, but I haven't really jumped in this time around. So I pulled that out because I know it works for me. Like I have had success in figuring out stuff about little girl Danielle using that deck. But I chose this deck. This is Nosotras Tarot. It's a Brazilian deck. It's no longer in print, but the publisher does have some other decks out. like End of the World Tarot and End of the World Lenormand. But this touches on my Caribbean roots a little bit, and it feels like memory. There are quote unquote, there is nudity here, people. There are quote unquote adult images here. So this is not necessarily like, this is a really intense Nine of Swords. I don't think you look at this and think inner child work, but this, I was the youngest of 3 siblings by about a decade and spent most of my time with adults. So I think I over-identified as an adult thinker as a young person. I understood myself to know more than I actually knew. So spending some time in images that are stories about grown-ups does that work, actually, like does some of that inner child work. I'm skipping some of the images that are a little more risque, but you know what, this is all female forms, and plays around with what quote femininity is, but like, you know, this is an unambiguous gesture at female fertility, and Nosotras is like our tarot. Yeah, so I haven't used this. You and I were talking earlier before this about challenges we have with working with decks that are enthusiastic in their representation of nudity. So where it's not just passing, it is confronting. This deck is that for me, right? Like this 3 of Cups, I was looking at that other 3 of Cups, right? Very like sweet and Slavic fairy tale. This 3 of Cups is very much about like a woman's reproductive organs. There's something here. This is not nudity, but this gestures at the body. I feel it in my body in a very particular kind of way that is confronting. So yeah, I've done a lot of fairy tale work with inner child work. This is not really fairy tale stuff. This is, I think, asking me to figure out something else that's a little more intense. I'm a little worried about that work, actually. So we'll see. I'm not going to do more than I'm ready for. I've been raving with you about Mother Moore's Carnival of Souls. This is the deck by the creator of Ethereal Visions, Matt Hughes. So this is an oracle deck that he created that is so fantastic. I love a good story. It comes with a storybook in addition to a meaning book and the cards. There are 32 cards. It is themed around a carnival. It's themed around this little girl, Arsenic Jane, going to the carnival and these figures who she meets. I read the storybook twice and cried both times that I read it. Like, ugly cried. But it's about a little girl in a scary place that is ultimately where she is in some ways saved by the scary things. So I find this like really interesting and exciting for this kind of exploration.
Can I just say,
yeah, what do you think of these images?
Because, well, I mean, that's that deck gives me the creeps, and I love carnival and circus theme. Wasn't my experience of circus, but I love you because you're like, I want to do inner child work, and then you find 3 confronting, sometimes creepy.
That's so interesting.
I'm like, what is going on here? I'm curious to whatever you want to share with me regarding your work. I'm curious to know.
I'm probably gonna be like, I made a bad choice.
You know, I just like, just for the sake of balance and like seeing what's possible, I kind of want you to throw in like a really saccharine deck with that and like just see what happens. Why not?
would be willing to do that. I would be willing to do that. We both really like, who did Zara Kitten Chops? What is her deck?
The Playful Heart Tarot.
Heart Tarot. I can get behind that deck. It is the kind of deck that I think I would usually be skeptical of, but it is beautifully made and certainly great for inner child work. So I'd pull that out and add it to the mix, but it's not the first to come to mind. I mentioned that I wanted to do some of what gets called shadow work. In this case, I really mean, I think that this season I am going to have, I already know because seasonally I usually do, but also I'm struggling with some, my animals hurting stuff. And so I'm going to have sad feelings and I need to figure out how to not be afraid of sad feelings. It's okay to have sad feelings as long as you manage them in a healthy way. So in addition to the professional help that is always helpful, I pulled some decks that are really pushing. These are, even if you like, quote, dark decks, these are dark. So here's a warning, people. They get weird and dark, but, I've worked with them before and felt like I was being edgy with myself. So the reason that I was working with them is just to show, like, I really like dark decks, like, show myself, but this is really about looking at this justice card. So a little girl with a brain and a heart in bowls and a knife pointed at the table. It makes me itchy. It's okay, right? Like, it's okay to sit with that and figure out what story is being told in this card. How is this justice? What feels uncomfortable and creepy about that? This is a confronting Knight of Swords. Like,
what is this deck?
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this is the Nigredo Tarot. Hold on.
This is not a one for me.
This is not a one for most people. I mean, there is horror here, right? Like some of these images, this is a Six of Wands. It's not particularly confronting. But you really have to have, I love horror movies. I am not deeply uncomfortable with horror images. So this isn't pushing too much in that regard. Like, it's a thing I'm not okay looking at. But I am saying I'm going to ask a question about the anxiety and grief I'm feeling. So we just scheduled little Theo's MRI, which is in part really great, right? Because we're going to get more information, but it's scary. If I sit down and ask a question, this is a question I would actually journal about. What am I most afraid of? What is the most frightening thing that I could learn after that MRI? And pull some of these cards, pull this Page of Swords. I'm gonna have to sit with that for a minute, really sit with that, and think about what story is happening. Like this version of the Hanged Man, what is the Hanged Man according to this card? He is he's squeezed, held hostage, uncomfortable, inverted. There's no breaking out of that. The fish are flowing by, but he's not going anywhere. Like there's stuff. And I think before when I've worked with decks like this, it's been like, ooh, how can I like play with that discomfort? But right now I'm trying to just teach myself, do you see the wolf coming out of her stomach? Like I will be okay. So it's strange because I feel in some ways like I need to be nurtured right now. And there's no shame in that. And those are decks that I'll pull if I'm feeling especially tender. But I'm trying to figure out how I can work with decks like this. Let me skip to ones that are less troublesome for people. But like King of Cups, yikes. And feel and remind myself I can look at this and I'm safe, right? Like I can be emotionally safe. And in part, I know that because I go to therapy, people. Like, I always repeat, like, you know, therapy good. Therapy good.
That's the thing. I love a good horror movie. I don't know. There's something about those images. I will say I struggle. You know, this is part of also like my personal work with like wanting to use visual language as a means of communication. It has always been a thing. Like, I mean, I have movies from when I was a child that I remember watching when I was like not quite old enough yet. And like certain images from those movies are still emblazoned in my mind in a very specific way. Like if I actually have gone back as an adult and watched a few of those movies, and you know they're fine, but I don't know. There's something about confronting images. I gotta be in a right space for that in particular.
You know, when we worked with Marielle together, we were both talking about how, I don't know if we said this together, but for me, I was surprised by the degree to which I found that deck really confronting and unsettling. It was forcing me to do work that I didn't know it was going to ask me to do, and it just wasn't the right time to do that work. So in some ways, I was so caught off guard and like unprepared for that I found that far more difficult than like, I'm grabbing the Dark Mirror Oracle. Like, I know what I'm getting here, people. These are a lot. These are not decks that I would use to read for other people like ever, unless they specifically asked for them. But again, I mean, there's something about really reminding myself I can do these readings and I'm safe. Yeah. That's like I've never done that. I've never kind of sat with like, yeah, there's something about like my conceptualization of safety and reminding myself that no matter how challenging these images are in making me engage with a question about like, what am I most afraid of for this health thing? By the end of that journaling session, okay, it's like a really ugly King of Cups, right? Like he's really, I don't like his hat. I don't know what's going on with his face. He looks like melted wax. But like, what does he have to teach me? Yeah. So anyway, that was me talking an awful lot. Is there anything that you want to finish up with?
Last thing, and I know we're like kind of over on time here, but my like kind of third thing that I'm really working with is sitting with questions, right? And like not needing kind of a structured way to answer them. And part of that is through this sort of like abstract creative work that I'm doing and like communicating with the tarot in visual ways. But a huge part of that is going to be oracle work and using oracle, like going to oracle instead of tarot, because I feel like oracle it depends on the deck, of course, but in my experience, the types of oracle decks I like aren't really interested in clarity. And I know we use oracle as clarifiers, but if you use them in a specific kind of way, it's like uninterested in giving you a straightforward answer to your questions. So decks that I'm going to be working with specifically for that, I mean, it's going to be a Claire Mac fall for me. But the Faceted Garden Oracle, we all know and love this, so I'm not going to flip through it. The Illuminated Earth Oracle, another Claire Mac deck. And then Cat Ryle's Roots and Wings Oracle. This is also great for that like grounding in nature practice that I want to return to, because I mean, I love her work. She was working on a tarot deck for like a hot minute, and I don't know if she still is. I hope she is. But anyway, all that to say is like kind of encouraging myself, keeping oracle a little bit more accessible than tarot when it comes to asking questions and exploring them.
So here's a question. You're talking about breaking out of structure in some way, inviting yourself to get loose. Tarot is very structured. It is a system. Oracle is like, go nuts. Like I could be anything. You don't know. So is that part of what this work with Oracle is?
Yeah, definitely. It is like, I mean, you can do a deck study with an oracle deck, like I'm sure you can, but that's not the type of work that I'm interested in doing here. It's like, yeah, it's and then to respond back. So especially if this is with journal work and like this journaling that I'm trying, that's speaking, using both visual and like language, written verbal language, if you will. Yeah, having conversation with something that is already unstructured in an unstructured way. And just kind of seeing where that takes me, like being willing to kind of follow the rabbit a little bit, and not feeling like I need to, control it and, here's my 3-card reading, here's what it's saying, done, sort of thing. But being okay with leaving a reading with more questions.
Yes, I like that. I like that. I pulled out a deck to use for our wrap-up reading, and I realized I didn't mention Goliath came out with a 3rd edition. It's not a mini, but it is much smaller than his previous decks have been. So it is a deck that I pulled out to sit next to Nigredo and Dark Mirror. So I'm going to use this for our joint reading to wrap up. But I realized when I was kind of digging into this, not with a reading, but just sitting with each of these images, they are very particular approaches to the archetypes of the tarot. He's named his cards. So this 9 of Wands is the darkness before dawn. This 9 of Pentacles is the tranquil spotted deer. I was asking myself, like, what? I'm not big for animal only decks. What is this deck doing? And I think that this with the black and white and the animals and the like, there's kind of something mystical happening in his art, and it's just beautiful. But this feels like it's inviting me to do some kind of like, what's buried in me? Like, what's the wild kind of uncurated self inside feeling? I think there's something there. And I think Nigredo will stir this up too. But we as teachers have to be really good, and you as a parent have to be really good at feeling your feelings and performing through them. So if I'm, if when my husband fell off a roof and I was teaching, I couldn't go in like sobbing. I had to do my teaching thing and I would have fun, but I had to mask, as all of us have to do at times. But it's really easy for me to mask and not realize I'm doing it. I think there's something here that is an invitation to unmask. I don't know why Goliath feels especially good for that. Certainly Nigredo is like, you're not there's no room for you to mask here. So anyway, I'm grabbing Goliath. How about for our wrap-up question? I haven't started this work that I've laid out. It sounds like you've dipped your toe in, but how does the question sound? What is the first step or next step we can take to ease into this new season of practice? Like, I've laid out all these big ambitions. You've laid out this big, like, these books and these, like, what is it we should keep in mind as we take that first step into this seasonal transition? How does that sound?
I love it. I'm pulled out the Illuminated Earth Oracle for all of my, like, let's go to Oracle. Let's do it.
And next to Goliath, we've got some nature going on here. We have
No, you said Goliath, and I was like, that will be very lovely together.
I love Faceted Garden. I'm so excited that you're working with that this fall. Okay.
Next step.
This is such an interesting image. So I have the 2 of Swords, the blind seal.
I have support. Look at how mirrored these images are.
Hands kind of pull, like, so gazing towards us, or the face towards us.
Mm-hmm.
Hands pulled inward, kind of towards the chin or face. Eyes not exactly meeting us. and there aren't, maybe I'm not remembering, I've worked more with the Faceted Garden than Illuminated Earth. There aren't a lot of human figures, are there, in Illuminated Earth? So it feels notable that we got one of the human figures. Okay.
I think, okay, so I think what this is kind of saying, so we've got our seal that's alone with his candle sticking out of his eyeballs. You know, I think this is saying before you dive in and like go full ham. I don't know about you, but I, having ADHD, have this tendency to like go as hard as possible. When I get excited, especially when I get creatively excited, I'm like, yes, I'm here and I'm doing it. And I tend to get burnt out. I burn the candle at both ends, per our blind seal with his candles in his eyeballs. And I like don't, I tend not to take like a step, like a second before I step into that space and go, okay, what's actually realistic here? Like what can I manage here? And even insofar as like having a conversation with somebody, like what we're doing here, I never would do stuff like this. I would just go, this is an idea I have, I want to do it, and I'd dive into it, and then I'd get burnt out really quickly. Or, you know, by the end of fall, I'd be like, God, I don't want to touch a tarot deck ever again. Sort of thing. And so I think this is saying, like, before we go, before we, you, I, anybody watching, if you're thinking about like your practice moving forward and you've got a bunch of ideas, take a second to think about it. Talk to somebody that you trust about it. Like reach out for support, whether it be a person or if you like have any sort of faith practice where you're like leaning into a guide of any sort, like just really lean into that before you set off on your journey.
I like that. So what I'm picking up from this, I think, complements that insight or that reading is I think both of us are moving away from air this season. We are both trying to be less rigid in our thinking. And, you know, when I taught English to 4-year-olds in South Korea, and this is like the universal sign for no. Is you're like teaching young children anything, like you do this and say the word no and everyone's clear on what's supposed to happen. This feels like if we're starting to overthink, this feels like nope, naughty, like slapping our hand away. This feels like it's saying pause, whatever steam you're getting on your like air train, you're overthinking. We've laid out our fancy like curriculum of this season, but where you're talking about support, I think what I'm feeling that connects with that is like, what medicine do you need? Stop overthinking it. Out of all this stuff that I laid out, I might be inclined to sit and say, like, why don't I start with the napes? Because, like, that's, you know, I want to start with cartomancy and whatever. No, like, for example, I just scheduled that appointment for the MRI. Maybe I want to sit with the cards, you know, with dark mirror and remind myself that I'm safe. Like, I don't know that that is structured with the syllabus I've laid out, like, is a fit, but I think the whole point, right, is that we are doing less of that and more enthusiastically embracing the organic way that this happens. So, like, organically, what will support you? And this actually feels like a reminder if I'm having trouble knowing what will support me, this is like, call Amelia. You know, if I think I know what that I laid out that would be really helpful right now, but if I was really having trouble, this does feel like a ask a friend, like the phone a friend.
Yeah, I mean, find somebody that you trust and talk to them.
Yes.
Definitely. Because I think there are so few humans in this deck, in particular in the Illuminated Earth. And this one has not one, but the suggestion of 2 humans. So I think, you know, reminder that you're
where it's at. That's where it's at. This is not very inviting. Yeah.
Don't do that. Do this. All right, friends, if you have made it this far, thank you. We appreciate you. We applaud you. We would love to know, what are some practices that you are hoping to start this fall, whether you're like, or if you're continuing, like, what are you hoping to bring with you into the fall? We'd love to hear about that. I love this kind of stuff. This is why we wanted to make this video, is because we liked watching other people's stuff about this. You will have hopefully all of the decks and books that we mentioned listed below, as well as links to our social media and our website, where you can book with either or both of us for a reading, as well as reach out about a mentorship. We do offer mentorships as well, if you're looking to implement some practices in your daily life. We can work with you on that. But do you have anything to say, Danielle?
I don't, other than thank you for surviving with us through this whole review of what our fall practice is. I loved this excuse to kind of construct and imagine for myself what it would be. So it's really helpful, everyone.
All right. Until next time, friends, we'll see you in the lab.
Bye, everyone.